some people come in just to have a show back. So there'd be music, the LED animation. Just want to learn this myself very quickly when I want to. I'm here to just, I work with lip sync. And they're all, when you just cuss the countdown first, 5 to 1 minute more. At the end of the day, it's a bit of a yeah, I need something.
Assalamualaikum. How are you? Sağ ol.
No, don't behave. Okay.
O çantamı da bir getir. Tamam. Özgür. Özgür. Özgür.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Director of the Atlantic Council's Rafik Hariri Center for the Middle East, Frederick Huff. Şimdi sözü Atlantik Konseyi Refik Hariri Orta Doğu Merkezi Direktörü Sayın Frederick Huff'a veriyoruz.
Well, thank you, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good afternoon. Our next panel, which is also the last panel of this conference, will address a subject of great importance to Turkey, to the region, and of course, to the people of Syria. The subject is the reconstruction of Syria. Now, some may believe that this discussion is premature, that a country at war for over 6 years shows no sign of conflict resolution, that it offers no conditions in which large-scale reconstruction can take place, that this is, in essence, an empty conversation. I take a different view entirely. I believe that a vision and a plan for rebuilding Syria are long overdue, and their absence contributes to the prolongation of this horrible conflict. The question, what follows Assad, has often been used as an excuse for Western inaction in Syria. The answer to that question is not the name of another person. It is not the name of a political party or movement. The answer to what follows Assad must feature a definition of a prosperous and peaceful Syria that enables genuine self-rule by empowering local governance and by elevating citizenship over sect and ethnicity. A Syria that celebrates its diversity and makes it possible for the sons and daughters of Syria to live lives of dignity and accomplishment in Syria, rather than as immigrants or refugees. The Atlantic Council's Rafik Hariri Center for the Middle East, which I'm proud to lead, recently launched a 2-year program to define a vision of a Syria made whole and to formulate a plan to make it so. The Hariri Center Senior Fellow leading this program is Faisal Itani. He will moderate today's discussion. Mr. Omar Shawaf, a Saudi-Syrian businessman heading the Turkey-based NGO Bina, is in the audience, and he is the driving force behind this project. His encouragement is deeply appreciated. It is right, I think, that the first non-Washington, D.C. discussion under the auspices of this reconstruction program takes place here in Turkey. For years before the Syrian revolution, Ankara worked hard to build a solid relationship with Damascus and to establish mutually beneficial business ties. All of it, was undone by an Assad family and entourage that saw collective punishment and mass homicide as the pathway to political survival. Considering the sacrifice Turkish taxpayers have made to deal humanely and decently with Syrian migrants and refugees, I think it would be appropriate for Turkish businesses and Turkish workers to play a major role in the rebuilding of Syria. I'll conclude with a statement of the obvious. Syria's resurrection as a state and society is not simply a matter of bricks and mortar. The goal must be political legitimacy. a stable system in which virtually all Syrians agree on the rules of the political game. Reconstruction, as we'll find in our discussion, need not await the complete arrival of a system fully reflecting the consent of the governed, but the persistence of the Assad regime and the generous funding of Syria's physical reconstruction are simply not compatible. Faisal, over to you and your distinguished colleagues. I look forward to your discussion.
Thank you, Fred. I think this is the perfect introduction, which will allow me to dive really straight into our discussion today. Is better? So we have three distinguished panelists with us from quite different backgrounds, all of whom have approached or looked at this problem from a different angle. What I'd like to do is pose a few questions to them to get a conversation going between us. And then after that, we'll try to pull in the audience for questions and answers and commentary on your side. So without further ado, let me start with you, Mona. You've tackled this through a US government lens, as well as through your own scholarship. Could you share some thoughts on the stabilization component of this challenge and what you see as the relationship or linkage between the stabilization phase in a war context and how we get to sort of longer term reconstruction? Foremost on my mind as I ask you this question is the future of the city of Raqqa and its surroundings as this political situation is changing now, given the controversy and the complexity behind that background. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Faisal, and thanks to the Atlantic Council for inviting me here today. First, just to comment on Fred's excellent introduction and to underscore that discussion of rebuilding Syria today comprises anything but empty talk. This is an endeavor that's going to require quite a bit of thinking and planning in order to arrive at the vision that Fred began to sketch out. And of course, it's conceptual work that needs to be done first and foremost by Syrians as they determine and think through the future of their country. Faisal, your question, though, is critical. I can't underscore enough how important it is to focus today on stabilization, which is a necessary first step to get to that ultimate goal of a rebuilding of Syria. Stabilization in Syria today is a critical goal, given the degree of suffering that continues to go on in that country, and how critical it is that as conflict begins to recede in parts of the country, in areas, for example, in which ISIS is flushed out, in order for those victories to be maintained and sustained, it is essential to stabilize those areas. I know my other colleagues on the panel can speak in greater detail about the specifics of the activities that go on the ground that comprise any successful stabilization program. But Faisal, you raise a very important question, which is the question of Raqqa. As the campaign for Raqqa continues to gather momentum, this is going to raise a number of, I would argue, very important strategic challenges that we have to start to think about now. What are those? First, I would say, what does stabilization look like in the absence of a political settlement? I mean, I think it's safe to say that we are going to see the battle for Raqqa itself begin sometime in a matter of weeks, perhaps. No more than a couple of months, I would guess. Once the city is seized, how do we think about Raqqa? In the absence of a political settlement with respect to the overall destiny and future of Syria. We can't sit back and wait for that destiny or that settlement to come into play. And so it's going to be essential to think about the elements of what makes for a successful stabilization program, working from the ground up, working from the bottom up, which is how we've been working in opposition-held parts of Syria now for quite some time. There are important, however, I would say, geopolitical issues that also come to play in Syria that really constitute a critical challenge. Namely, how to mediate between the various conflicting interests on the ground inside Syria today. What is the role of the Kurds? What's the role of Arab opposition forces? How do various patrons of those forces interact? Most importantly, what do the local governance structures of Raqqa look like once the city has been seized from ISIS and held and is secure? These are critical questions. Without answering those questions sufficiently, we will very quickly find ourselves back in a situation of conflict. And so I don't propose to have those answers. We can talk about what that looks like, but I think it's going to be essential to mediate those interests. And in particular, the differences that currently exist between the United States, Turkey, and the PYD, these are critical issues that have to be addressed and mediated in advance of any successful campaign to retake Raqqa. Let me conclude maybe with just a final thought about what else we should be thinking about as we are thinking through the challenges of stabilization inside Syria. And here I would highlight, I think, 3 areas that we need to focus our attention on. The first is resilience. It's this idea of ensuring and helping Syrians living in Syria today to have livelihoods, to have food security, to be able to sustain themselves inside the country. And there's already some amount of work that's being done on this. There's already some programming that's being developed to help ensure that Syrians have a way to stay inside Syria in areas in which the conflict has receded. Second key priority is education. This is critical for the future of Syria, for any successful rebuilding of Syria. Syria's youth have to be educated, need to go back into school. Right now, it's estimated that there are nearly 2 million Syrian school-aged children inside Syria who are not in school. And so a key area of focus has to be rebuilding the education sector inside Syria. And again, this is not a task that can wait. And finally, back to one of the initial points that I raised, we also need to be doing much more work on the ground with respect to local level dialogues and the building of social cohesion. This is going to be particularly critical in areas where there are mixed populations, in areas, for example, where there might be mixed Arab-Kurdish populations. It's going to be essential that, that those that are involved in the stabilization effort ensure that there is also an amount of reconciliation at the grassroots that begins to take root. Why don't I leave it at that?
Thanks, Mona, and thanks especially for highlighting the centrality of at least the relevance of politics to this question of reconstruction. We don't, in our work, believe in treating this as completely a technical problem, although there's an enormous technical component, of course. This is how we connect it to what is happening today rather than talking about it as if it's an abstraction. Andy, let me move on to you. You're a Director General at the Syria Recovery Trust Fund, and your organization has offered a pretty unique and singular model of funding for reconstruction projects. What are some of the lessons you've learned in the war context, and what is your thinking on how those can be applied as parts of Syria, as and when parts of Syria go into some sort of stability? How can those be applied and scaled up to a larger, more meaningful level?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Faisal, and thanks to the Atlantic Council for having me. Let me just take you one step back before we talk about lessons learned and say, something that's very important. The uniqueness of the Syria Recovery Trust Fund is really that it was a tool that's built for purpose, and hence it gave us a lot of flexibility to adjust a lot of the procedures and eligibilities and so on. The most interesting factor of success in any project that we had was really the Syrian people on the ground and their resilience and their ability to adapt to very challenging situations with very limited resources. Resources, be it finance, be it security, be it time, everything. So really that's the capital that we need to try to maintain inside the country. And this is I think the most important lesson that we've learned, that no matter how much we are going to invest in the electricity or water or hospitals or food security or any other sector that we are investing, we are really reinvesting in the human capital inside Syria. Because I think that's the most important loss that we've suffered over the past 6 years. Half of, if not more, of the refugees in neighboring countries and in Europe are middle-class, educated professionals. And those are really the capital of the country that would allow us, hopefully post-conflict, to reconstruct, but of course, through a process. Historically, people who stay out of their homeland countries for a few years usually don't come back. They have a life, they have jobs. So really what we are trying to do while restoring and rehabilitating infrastructure and the services, trying to maintain that human capital where it belongs and where it's mostly needed. With all the hospitality of all the neighboring countries and other countries that have received refugees, refugees really don't belong there. They belong in their home country, and we want them to stay there. That's where we should really work on keeping them. And if we are talking about funding, covering cost of a refugee where he's really not being productive is much higher than homeland country where he is productive and contributing as well to the economy and to himself. So I think that's any kind of reconstruction that we should be talking about should keep that in the core focus of any program. We don't want to build a nice building. We want a nice school for the next generation to get out. We don't want a hospital. We need a hospital that basically would allow us to reduce mortality in born babies, in elderly people. I think this is really what reconstruction is all about. We don't want to reconstruct bridges and towers. We want to reconstruct that society by providing them services and by allowing them to contribute to that so that they feel that they are included. And I think this is the most important lesson that we've really learned over the past 3 years. And for us, reconstruction is not about to start. It started 3 years ago. We've already delivered a number of projects. In 2015, some 1.8 million people benefited of essential services projects from the SRTF. This is the real gain that we had. 2016, the number became almost 4 million people in 150 communities in 5 governorates. And that's unprecedented in a similar situation and would not have been possible, quite honestly, without all the support from international community. We have 14 countries behind us, not only financing the trust fund, but also providing all the assistance and support and expertise to be able to deliver a similar program in such an unprecedented situation, really. Usually, recovery would start post-conflict. This is the first time that it started during conflict. It would usually require a central government as a main partner to work with. SRTF does not work with the central government. We work with grassroots service providers, NGOs, civil society, and possibly maybe with the UN one day. That is, again, something that is allowing us to invest in the human capital by bringing up not only the technical, but also the level of structure and administrative level of those partners that we work with. Historically, Syria was a very centralized government and still is in many parts. So at best, technocrats were operators or maintaining whatever is installed or designed in the capital. Right now, they are participating in design of infrastructure, in design of services, strategizing their priorities. And that's not a small task for people who have never done this before. And they are doing it again in such a extraordinary, difficult situation. So really, whatever, and I encourage everyone, whatever we do, we should always keep the human capital in the core focus of what we are doing. How can we utilize this capacity? How can we maintain this capacity? How can we improve their capacity? Because post-conflict, at best, we will receive some grants, I don't know, 1%, 2% of the need. This is not going to be enough for anything. What we really need to have at that time is the people who are going to reproduce and rebuild the country. That's really what the lesson that I have learned in the past 3 years. And I'll leave it here.
Thank you. There's a lot more to discuss within those points as well, but we'll move on to make sure everybody gets their thoughts in. Mr. Mehmet, your organization has been central to the relief of hundreds of thousands of Syrians on Turkish soil. Based on your efforts, your lessons, and what you've learned, what would it take, in your opinion, if you could tell us a bit about those as well, what would it take, in your opinion, for these people to be able to return to Syria? And what role could Turkey possibly play in that effort, whether it's through logistics or financing or expertise or any? Please go ahead.
Teşekkür ediyorum. Ben de bu toplantıya davet edildiğim için teşekkür ediyorum. Hem
I would like to agree with both Hani and Mona. What they have said is very true. Of course, we have to be aware of the following. How did Syria come to be in this situation? In April 2011, unfortunately, it had a population of more than 10 million, and perhaps a civilization of more than 1,000 years. A central Syria, suddenly, there's a significant problem. There's this trouble called Daesh. First, some people wanted to associate this Daesh with the religion of Islam. Thank God, the fact that they have nothing to do with the religion of Islam, the fact that they're a produced terrorist organization and a machinery which eats up people. Thankfully, all people are aware of this at the moment, because in Islam, there is no place for killing people. In no period of Islam has a society been demolished by using the religion. None of these things, none of these elements have anything to do with Islam. We've been trying to announce this to the entire world for the past 6-7 years. At first stage, they were talked about as being tens of thousands of people on different media, on television. They have been advertised incredibly intensely, and by knowing or unknowingly, it was made sure that people became very frightened of this terrorist organization, and they have taken over this society. First of all, how Syria came to be in this situation, we have to analyze it well, so that in this geography, some others will never try to repeat these things again. That's important, I think. It's not just the Daesh terrorist organization there. There are PYDs and similar terrorist organizations. And our president, in his speech in the morning, touched upon the same topic. Raqqa and Münbik, by using different terrorist organizations, if we try to clean those places of Daesh, I think it will be an even more serious mistake. Today, until the year 2015, for 4.5 years, on the soil of the Turkish Republic, Kilis, Hatay, Antep, rockets were falling every single day, and we lost citizens of ours by rockets that fell to this side of the border. For 5 years, the EU and the UN could not come up with a solution. At the very end, it was only our natural right in order to protect our own citizens together with you. So we started an operation, the Euphrates Shield operation. And today in that region, 2,000 kilometers square almost, thank God, there's been really a cleaning of sorts, and Daesh has been eradicated significantly. In fact, the UN should uphold this as a very serious example. And when there's a will, a region can be cleaned of a terrorist organization such as Daesh. If you significantly, seriously put this on the table and analyze, it can be seen that such problems can be solved very easily. If we, in the remaining part of Syria, if we try to clean the rest with different terrorist organizations, in the coming 5 or 10 years or quarters of centuries, we'll be encountering even more significant problems. Of course, in our country, there are approximately 3 million Syrians, and these Syrians, in fact, we do not accept them as refugees because for more than 1,000 years now, they have been interconnected with our own people. 920-kilometer long border. Therefore, the peoples know one another really well. Kilis, Antep, Hatay, Şanlıurfa, Mardin, these 6-7 border provinces, there are serious relations there. You know, they have married people off, they have similar lifestyles. So the entire world should be thankful for the following. There is a neighbor of Syria, such as the Republic of Turkey. If the Republic of Turkey and its leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, if it went for them, where would these Syrians have gone? This is really something I wonder about. Our friends who are here, they should be reading this really well. Some countries of Europe, in order to receive 300, 400 refugees, they hold referenda, and the answer is no in these referenda. I would like to invite the entire humanity to the following. Please empathize. We, these 4 people up here with me leading the way. If we do not empathize, we will never be able to solve the problem of Syria. First, we should definitely have social and cultural reconstruction aspect. This is more important than ever. For 5-6 years now, both inside Syria and inside Turkey, we have been hosting more than 3 million Syrians. As AFAD, representing Republic of Turkey, we've been there. Both internally and externally, we have established many physical facilities. If you do not associate these things with cultural activities, they all mean nothing. We Turks have a proverb. You put the nightingale in a golden cage, and it sings, "My homeland, my homeland." He's concerned about the translation, but yes, I think we've done a very good job of it. Therefore, these people, we have prepared places for them to live, and they're very modern. Contrary, humanitarian associations have flattered us in this regard, and more than $25 million worth of funding have been provided for these people. And for 2015, 37 over 1,000 of our national revenue has been allocated to the education of these people, to the sheltering of these people, to the health care of these people. I will quote you a few figures. Up until now, 22 million polyclinic services have been rendered in health care, and as of today, 209,000 Syrian women have given birth in our country, meaning 209,000 people have been born on the soil of the Republic of Turkey. A very interesting example. 11 of those, the families, named their children, their kids, Afad, because there was only Afad representing the Turkish Republic. So, if we don't promise a future to these people, as all countries of the world, and of course with UN and EU leading the way. Ms. Mona said around 2 million children in the school age exist. Only in our country, approximately 1 million children are here who should be going to school. The population of Syria, if you consider it to be around 12, 14 million, and 1/3 of these, if you estimate to be around school age, I guess, and I also mean Syria internally, there must be 4 million children who should be going to school. And I don't think there's really a good education in Damascus anymore today under these bombs. 50 kilometer, 100 kilometer away in Aleppo, in Idlib, with chemical weaponry. 6-month-old babies, 2-year-old toddlers, they're being massacred. You cannot talk of education on this land. And this has an impact on our country as well. So therefore, there should be rational policies to prevent the killing of these people. And this dirty war should emergently, under the leadership of the UN, be terminated. And what a bitter fact this is. Chemical weaponry in front of 7 billion people, they are being used. And I went to Hatay on that particular day, and that 2-year-old child who arrived, you can tell how much they're suffering. I saw these with my own 2 eyes. You have to see this. We're always involved with them. We are always experiencing this pain, this drama as the Republic of Turkey, and for that reason, by embracing terrorist organizations, you can never prevent terror. The UN should come together seriously and come up with rational policies and put the Republic of Turkey in the core, in the focal point of this entire topic, and then they will see how easy this is for us to solve. Physical establishments, they don't matter. You can rebuild Aleppo, you can rebuild Idlib, Çobanbey, Jarablos, Aziz. We are reconstructing currently a big part of these places. We have repaired many schools. 100,000 people went back to Syria. These are not difficult things. What's difficult is that up until today, as humanity, what we have not been able to achieve. This Daesh, who came from nowhere. The fact that the world could not intervene in them or did not intervene in the right manner. Just because of this, for 5-6 years now, they've been massacring these people in this region, and this should be prevented very emergently. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I'm actually encouraged by the fact that a conversation about reconstruction is also consistently here a conversation about people. I myself, I'm going to hold my questions back because we don't have that much time, and I'd like to go to the audience to take some questions or even your own thoughts on some of the things being discussed here. If you'd raise your hand, I'll call on you to my best abilities in the order in which I see you. Lady in the back, sorry.
Hi, thank you. Lina Khatib from Chatham House. My question is, could reconstruction be used as a way to impose some form of conditionality that is political in order to push for a political settlement to the conflict?
Any volunteers for that easy question?
Yeah.
Go ahead, one.
Not very easy. But yes, of course, I think reconstruction or any sort of post-conflict assistance program could be considered as a peace dividend that could be put on the table in a political negotiation and settlement. However, unfortunately, in the history, if that is done, then basically you are rewarding warring parties by providing them with access to assistance. So it needs to be very carefully provided as a dividend, because otherwise you're just making them change their camouflage uniform into suits.
Well, this is a tough one, I acknowledge.
This is a tough one. Maybe I'll add just a couple of thoughts. I think Hani is correct, and I think one thing we have to understand is to what extent is the current regime in Syria attempting to re-engineer the country, redefine its demographics by moving populations in and out of various areas and by trying to create facts and realities on the ground. And I think to Hani's point, one certainly doesn't want to have reconstruction reward that behavior. That said, there's an urgency to solving Syria, as I think we've heard very passionately on the panel, and I don't think any of us would disagree with that. The needs are going to be enormous, hundreds of billions of dollars, perhaps. The question that you raise, I think, is a very interesting one, and it merits deeper exploration. To my mind, right now, we are at an impasse in Syria, and as I noted at the outset of my comments, we are pursuing stabilization in the absence of a settlement. And I can't underscore enough the innovative work that Hani and the Syria Recovery Trust Fund is doing on the ground in Syria. It's really quite extraordinary. But it does raise a question, to what extent can Russia in particular, given that it is now going to be in a quagmire in Syria, to what extent can the question of an international community coming forth and assisting with the reconstruction funding of Syria be used as a lever on Russia? The Russians went to the EU, I believe, in November of last year and asked said basically, it's not on us, over to you, EU, and the answer was absolutely not. The US, we fondly recall our own episode in Iraq and the Pottery Barn rules of you break it, you own it. To what extent do those rules then apply to Russia and the regime with respect to Aleppo? So I think there's an interesting question here to be pursued, but it has to be done very delicately, and I think one has to continually think about the welfare of Syrians on the ground and their well-being, and figure out how to thread that needle between using that leverage to perhaps push toward a lasting political settlement, but also not wanting to prolong the suffering and hold people hostage by holding money over their head. I don't know what the answer is to that, though, but that's how I'd frame it.
Yeah, you sort of also mentioned the international environment, which maybe sort of by default means that if the political arrangement is unacceptable or doesn't generate a consensus, then the places that the money would come from are not going to pay. So that's the flip side of the leverage. Can I take another question or comment?
Hi, Noor Malas from the Wall Street Journal. My first question is a follow-up to Lina's. If you can address sort of the great game element of reconstruction, not so much as political leverage to bring about a resolution to the conflict, but what we already see in terms of Russian and Iranian, perhaps, investments ongoing before the war is over, and how that may shape the post-war society that may emerge. My second question is whether you feel there's enough of a recognition in the international community and also the humanitarian aid community that of the millions of Syrians that are currently refugees, many, given the current trajectory of the conflict, would not choose to go home. And what kind of contingency planning is being done both regionally and internationally for that?
Tabii biz dönem dönem anketler yapıyoruz. Bu misafirlere soruyoruz.
Held and we ask our Syrian guests. My guess is that when this war, if this war is over, and if no other people are settled in their lands, more than half will return, I believe. So wherever you take these people, if you make their homeland livable, these people will go back to their own land, their places. But there is this danger. In Syria, there are Arabs, there are Turkmens, there are Kurds, and within each of these groups, there are different sects. And they've been living in this geography for hundreds of years, and they were happy. There are also Christians, Muslims, and there are again people of different beliefs. For example, in Iraq, there were the Yazidis, and they lived there for thousands of years. But we don't know what the reason was. Daesh went in there and cleaned out about 70,000 Yazidis, and there were serious dramas there. And yes, the PKK terrorist organization settled in their place. So we have to prevent such conflicting activities, and we have to put some meaning to them. We have to ask what they mean. We have to really look into those. Those around the table should know the details. So you talk about going back. This is what is the condition, the precondition for returning home. At El Bab, at Babat, if the existing population there, if they were previously Arab or of other origins, if these people go back to their lands, and if that land has already been given to others and those people are settled there, then you can't expect these people to go back to their homes. So every person needs to go back to where they once belonged. You can go to Syria and go and check the area cleaned out by the Euphrates Shield exercise, and you will see it's all green, and there's farming, and life has begun there. But the rest of the world needs to lead the way. Thank you.
Well, if I may jump on oh, sorry, go ahead, please, Hani.
Just to briefly answer the first question that Noor gave, it's definitely a very challenging situation, but it's part of the demographic change that is ongoing right now, not only in Damascus, but in the greater Damascus suburbs and Homs and other areas. I think it's one of the major concerns that everyone who's working on Syria right now is having. Unfortunately, there is really nothing that we can do about it from where we are sitting, and not even, I think, with the paralyzed UN Security Council, anything can be done over there as well. So what we are hoping for and what we are trying to do is keep as many as we can where they are right now to stop the bleeding from happening. And hopefully, post-conflict, if their homes are there and no one is staying in them and services are being provided, then people would go back. But again, the longer it takes, the less the chances are those people coming back.
Maybe if I could also just jump in on both of your questions. I mean, first with, I think Hani has laid out exactly correctly this notion of population movements. There's also commerce and economic activity, Iranian purchases of companies, and a way of sort of enmeshing in the fabric of regime-held areas that I think is going to constitute a challenge going forward. There's also a security situation that's quite different from the Syria pre-conflict, and that is the proliferation of militias in regime-held area, Shia militias that are there, that are playing an important role because of the regime's own lack of manpower to hold territory. Of course, Hezbollah is there as well. There's Russia's attempts to create this fifth force, whatever it's called, the same idea. So I think there's a certain reality on the ground that is being created before our very eyes, and the longer this goes on, the more enmeshed it's going to be, and the harder it's going to be with respect to what a future Syria looks like. To your second question, if I could, I mean, in my previous incarnation when I worked at USAID and would visit and travel quite a bit in Jordan and Lebanon and speak to refugees, almost to a person, they expressed a deep desire to return. And I don't think we should underestimate that and how important those aspirations are. And that then speaks to Hani's point, both in terms of in areas in which conflict has receded, ensuring that people that are there can stay. I'm not going to be, naive about the prospects of refugees returning anytime soon, as has been noted in a previous panel. I think the average stay of refugees is at least 17 years. And so I think we have to be realistic about that. And that's where, first, Turkey absolutely should be commended for its generosity in hosting 3 million refugees and the very important role that Turkey has played in doing that. It's a model for other countries. I would also hold up Jordan and some of the ways in which Jordan, through the Jordan Compact, is also attempting to wrestle very directly with this issue of refugees and host communities by looking to ensure that Syrian children all have a place in Jordanian schools, and also looking to provide up to 200,000 temporary work permits over 4 years. They have a long way to go. I don't think they've even hit 50,000 at this point. School and work, those are the two critical issues that the international community needs to work on with respect to how to ensure refugees living in host communities are able to live in dignity, and again, ideally one day be able to return to Syria.
I think, if I may, you're absolutely right about the infiltration of the economy by the Iranians. When you're talking about things at the macro level, I would assume the Russians and Iranians don't have this sort of financial horsepower to rebuild the country, even if they can capture some strategic sectors. Does that sound right to you?
I think that's exactly right. And I think Russia is no economic powerhouse in and of itself. It's a country that's actually failing economically and is under pressure and perhaps growing pressure in that regard. So again, being completely, instrumental about this and trying to understand where the leverage points might be, it's certainly something to think through and explore and try to understand. Where are those weaknesses? To what extent can they be, I don't want to say exploited, but to what extent are those leverage points that might help push Syria toward a final political settlement that I think everyone very much wants to see happen.
Yeah, understood. Okay, well, my colleagues have gently indicated to me that we're pretty much out of time, actually. It's almost 5:30. Incidentally, 5:30 is when the closing reception will take place at the Swiss Terrace with General Jim Jones and Atlantic Council President and CEO Fred Kemp. Please, for the time being, join me in thanking our panelists for their excellent contribution. Thank you. Thank you.